Episode 5, A New Chapter of Freedom. A year ago, marking the end of the trial and what felt like the official end of my marriage. But endings, I've learned, are often not as clean as they seem. Life after Amy in the trial wasn't simply a new chapter, it was a whole new book, one I had to figure out how to write. Winning custody of the kids was a relief, but it came with challenges. Emma and Kevin had adapted well, at least on the surface, but their world had been shaken just as much as mine. My job wasn't just to parent them but to guide them through a transition none of us had asked for. Every wall, every piece of furniture, even the smallest knickknacks seemed to carry a memory of the life we once had. The house I had called home now felt like a museum of memories I didn't want to revisit. I knew that if I was going to move forward, I needed to reclaim this space not as a reminder of what was, but as a symbol of what could be. One Saturday morning, I gathered Emma and Kevin in the living room. "All right, you two," I said, clapping my hands. "It's time to make some changes around here." Emma's eyes widened. "Changes? Like what?" "Well," I said, gesturing around the room, "I was thinking we could repaint, rearrange, maybe even get some new furniture. What do you think?" Kevin bounced on the couch, his face lighting up. "Can we paint our rooms? I want mine to be superhero blue." "Of course," I said, smiling. "And you, Emma?" Emma tilted her head, thinking. "Pink and purple," she declared with a grin. "Done," I said. "This is going to be our project, so I need you both to help me. Deal?" "Deal," they chorused. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. We spent hours at the hardware store picking out paint colors, debating over furniture styles, and gathering supplies. The kids were completely immersed in the process, their excitement infectious. Painting day was an adventure in itself. Emma insisted on doing as much as possible herself, her tiny hands carefully brushing pink paint onto her walls. Kevin, on the other hand, treated the project like a superhero mission, declaring that his blue walls would make his room a fortress. "Daddy, this is so fun," Emma exclaimed, her cheeks smudged with paint. "It is, isn't it?" I said, laughing as Kevin accidentally splattered paint on his nose. It wasn't just about transforming the house, it was about creating new memories, new traditions, and a new sense of home. During one of our decorating sessions, Emma discovered an old photo album tucked away in the attic. She brought it downstairs, her curiosity piqued as she flipped through the pages. "Daddy, look," she said, holding up a picture of Amy and me on our wedding day. I glanced at the photo, my chest tightening. Amy and I looked so happy, so full of hope for the future. "Do you miss when we were all together?" Emma asked softly. Her question hung in the air, heavy with the kind of innocence only a child could carry. I took a deep breath, sitting down beside her. "I miss the good times," I said honestly, "but sometimes, things change, and when they do, we have to focus on making new good times." Emma nodded thoughtfully, her fingers tracing the edge of the photo. "I like how we're making the house now. It feels happy." Her words struck a chord. "Me too, sweetheart," I said, pulling her into a hug. As the house came together, so did I. For years, my identity had been wrapped up in being a husband and father. After the trial, I realized I had lost a part of myself along the way. It was time to rediscover who I was outside of those roles. I started running again, a hobby I had abandoned years ago. The early morning jogs became my sanctuary, a time to clear my mind, reflect, and set goals. With each step, I felt stronger and more in control of my life. I also began volunteering at a local community center, mentoring at-risk youth. Working with those kids was deeply fulfilling, reminding me of the resilience we're all capable of when given the right support. One day, while dropping the kids off at school, I ran into an old friend, David. "Mark," he called, his face lighting up as he approached. "It's been forever. How are you?" I hesitated, unsure how much to share. "It's been a tough year," I admitted, "but I'm doing better." David nodded, his expression understanding. "I heard about everything. I'm sorry, man, but you know what? Sometimes hitting rock bottom is the best place to rebuild from." His words stayed with me. For so long, I had been focused on surviving that I hadn't thought about thriving. David's encouragement reminded me that I had the power to create a life that wasn't just about getting by, it could be meaningful and fulfilling. Amy, meanwhile, was navigating her own path forward. While our interactions remained polite and focused on the kids, I couldn't ignore the changes I saw in her. She attended therapy, volunteered at local events, and seemed genuinely invested in being a better person. One afternoon, she called me unexpectedly. "Mark," she began, her voice hesitant, "I just wanted to thank you." "For what?" I asked, caught off guard. "For letting me still be part of the kids' lives," she said. I'm grateful." Her words were humbling. While forgiveness wasn't something I could give fully yet, I appreciated the sincerity in her voice. By the time the year anniversary of the trial rolled around, I felt like a different person. The anger and bitterness that had consumed me were no longer at the forefront of my mind. I had learned to let go, not for Amy's sake, but for mine. One evening, as the kids and I sat around the dinner table, Emma looked up at me with a thoughtful expression. "Daddy, are you happy now?" she asked. Her question caught me off guard, but I didn't hesitate in my response. "Yes, sweetheart," I said, smiling at her. "I'm happy because I have you and Kevin. You two are the best part of my life." Kevin grinned, his face smeared with spaghetti sauce. "We love you, Daddy." At that moment, I realized that happiness wasn't about having the perfect life. It was about finding joy in the little things, in the laughter of my kids, in the quiet moments of reflection, and in the sense of hope that had begun to bloom again. With the house finally transformed into a space that felt like home again, life began to settle into a rhythm. Mornings were filled with the hustle of getting Emma and Kevin ready for school. Afternoons were for homework and activities, and evenings brought family dinners and bedtime stories. For the first time in what felt like forever, I could breathe without the weight of the past crushing me. But there were still moments when the echoes of what had happened would creep in. Nights were the hardest. Once the kids were asleep, the silence of the house became a breeding ground for memories I would rather forget. I often found myself staring at the blank walls of my bedroom, thinking about what might have been. I realized that while the surface of my life was beginning to heal, there were still parts of me that needed attention. Letting go of anger and bitterness wasn't enough. I needed to rediscover who I was and what I wanted out of life. One of the first steps I took was reconnecting with people I had distanced myself from during the chaos of the last few years. Before, between work and the kids, I barely had time to think, let alone socialize. For so long, my identity had been wrapped up in my roles as a provider, a parent, and a husband. Now that one of those roles was gone, I needed to figure out what was left. I start small, join a group, pick up a hobby, anything to remind yourself that more than just a dad or an ex-husband. I started with something simple, running. It had always been a passion of mine, but I had abandoned it years ago when life got too busy. Now, I laced up my old running shoes and hit the pavement early every morning. At first, it was hard. My legs ached, and my lungs burned as I pushed myself through the neighborhood. But with each run, I felt stronger, not just physically, but emotionally. The steady rhythm of my footsteps became a kind of meditation, a way to clear my mind and focus on the present. I set small goals for myself, gradually increasing my distance and pace. Eventually, I worked up the courage to join a local running group. The first time I showed up, I felt out of place, surrounded by people who seemed far more experienced than I was. But as the weeks went on, I found my footing. The group was welcoming, and I even made a few new friends who encouraged me to sign up for a 10K race. Crossing the finish line of that race was more than just a personal achievement, it was a symbol of my determination to keep moving forward. Another major shift came when I started volunteering at the community center. It wasn't something I had planned, it just sort of happened. One day, while picking up Emma from practice, I noticed a flyer for a mentorship program. The idea intrigued me. I had always believed in the importance of helping others, and this felt like an opportunity to give back while also finding a sense of purpose. I signed up and was paired with a teenage boy named Alex. He was quiet at first, reluctant to open up, but over time, we built a rapport. He reminded me a bit of myself at that age, unsure of his place in the world, searching for something to hold on to. Through our weekly meetings, I saw how much he grew, not just academically, but in his confidence. It was a humbling experience, and it reminded me of the resilience we're all capable of when given the right support. While I was focusing on rebuilding my own life, Amy was doing the same. Our interactions remained cordial, but there was a noticeable shift in her demeanor. She seemed less defensive, more introspective. One evening, after dropping the kids off at my house, she lingered at the door. "Mark," she said hesitantly, "I just wanted to say, you're doing a great job with Emma and Kevin." Her words caught me off guard. "Thanks," I said cautiously. "I mean it," She continued, "They're happy and thriving because of you. I know I haven't made things easy, but I'm really grateful for how you've handled everything." I studied her for a moment. Her words felt genuine, and while they didn't erase the past, they softened some of the lingering tension between us. Despite the progress I was making, there were still moments when doubt crept in. One particularly difficult night, after putting the kids to bed, I found myself scrolling through old photos on my phone. Images of family vacations, birthday parties, and holidays flashed across the screen, each one a reminder of what I had lost. I stared at a photo of Amy and me, taken on our 10th anniversary. We were smiling, our arms wrapped around each other, looking like the perfect couple. I wondered if we had been happy then or if the cracks had already begun to form. But instead of dwelling on the what-ifs, I made a choice. I closed the photo album and opened a notebook I had started keeping, a journal of sorts. In it, I wrote about my goals, my hopes for the future, and the lessons I had learned over the past year. One entry stood out to me: happiness isn't about what you have, it's about what you make of what you have left. The next morning, I decided to celebrate how far we had come. I planned a weekend getaway for the kids and me, a trip to the mountains, where we could hike, camp, and just enjoy each other's company. The trip was everything I had hoped for. We spent our days exploring trails and roasting marshmallows by the fire, laughing and sharing stories. On the final night, as we sat under a sky full of stars, Emma leaned against me and sighed contentedly. "Daddy, I love this," she said. "Me too, sweetheart," I replied, wrapping an arm around her. At that moment, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in years. The mountain trip with Emma and Kevin felt like a turning point, a moment where I could finally say that the worst was behind me. Sitting under a canopy of stars with my children's laughter echoing in my ears, I realized that my life wasn't just moving forward, it was moving in the right direction. But while I had made significant progress, I knew there were still lessons to be learned and wounds to be healed. The end of a chapter doesn't mean the end of the story, it just means a new one is waiting to be written. When we went home, in the quiet moments, I would reflect on how far we had come since those dark days of anger and heartbreak. Time had done what it often does, softened the edges of pain and reshaped the past into lessons. Watching Emma and Kevin grow into adults was the most profound gift of all, a testament to resilience, love, and the unwavering bond we shared as a family. 15 years passed. Emma was 23 now, her bright, determined spirit stronger than ever. From the moment she could read, she had been fascinated by nature, often carrying around books about animals and ecosystems. It came as no surprise when she pursued a degree in environmental science. One weekend, she invited me to visit the community garden she had been working on as part of her latest project. The garden was beautiful, brimming with flowers, vegetables, and fruit trees, all arranged with meticulous care. "Dad, look at this," she said, pointing to a row of native plants. "This section is all about restoring biodiversity. It's one of my favorite parts of the project." I watched her with pride as she explained the significance of every detail, her voice full of passion. "You've created something incredible here, Emma," I said. She smiled, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "I just want to make a difference, you know, to leave things better than I found them." Her words struck a chord, reminding me of the way she had always approached life, with purpose and heart. Kevin, now 21, was carving his own path, though it was far different from Emma's. His love for storytelling, which had begun with his childhood fascination with superheroes, had blossomed into a dream of becoming a filmmaker. He was attending film school and already making a name for himself with his creative short films. One evening, he called me, his voice practically vibrating with excitement. "Dad, you're not going to believe this," he began. "What's up?" I asked, smiling at his enthusiasm. "My short film got selected for a film festival. It's going to be screened next month, and they're even giving me a chance to speak about it." "That's incredible, Kevin," I said, genuinely thrilled. "What's the film about?" "It's about family," he said after a pause. "How we can fall apart and come back together stronger. It's kind of inspired by us." His words hit me deeply, and I felt my throat tighten with emotion. "I'm so proud of you, Kevin," I said quietly. "You're going to do amazing things." "Thanks, Dad," he replied. "You're the reason I believed I could do this in the first place." While Emma and Kevin were finding their way in the world, Amy and I had found a way to coexist peacefully. Over the years, our relationship had evolved from cold civility to something resembling friendship. It wasn't the kind of friendship built on shared joy or trust, but one rooted in mutual respect and a shared love for our children. One summer, we all gathered at my house for a barbecue to celebrate Emma's graduation from college. It was a warm evening, the kind that made the air feel heavy with possibility. Emma and Kevin were laughing with their friends, their voices mingling with the sound of sizzling food on the grill. Amy approached me as I flipped burgers, her expression thoughtful. "Mark," she said, her voice soft, "you being the rock the kids needed, even when I couldn't be." Her words took me by surprise, but I nodded. "We both did our best," I said simply. She smiled, a hint of sadness in her eyes. "They turned out amazing, didn't they?" "They did," I agreed, pride swelling in my chest. As the years continued to pass, I found myself focusing on my own dreams again. Running, which had once been a hobby, became a passion. I started competing in races, eventually completing my marathon. The sense of accomplishment was exhilarating, a reminder that it was never too late to chase goals. I also began mentoring others, volunteering at a local youth center to help guide teenagers through their own challenges. It was fulfilling work, and it gave me a deeper appreciation for the resilience of the human spirit. One day, Emma and Kevin surprised me with a visit. They arrived at my house with bags of groceries and big smiles, insisting they cook dinner for me. As I watched them bustle around the kitchen, I felt a wave of gratitude wash over me. They had grown into such capable, kind, and passionate adults. Despite everything they had been through, they had thrived, each carving out a path that reflected their unique strengths and dreams. Over dinner, we reminisced about the past, laughing at old memories. "Do you remember when Kevin tried to paint his room and ended up with blue streaks in his hair?" Emma teased. Kevin groaned, covering his face. "It was a creative decision." "And do you remember when Emma decided to plant a vegetable garden and accidentally grew an entire field of zucchini?" Kevin shot back, grinning. Emma rolled her eyes, but she laughed, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. "Those were some wild times," I said, chuckling, "but I wouldn't trade them for anything." After dinner, Kevin pulled out his laptop to show us his latest short film. The screen lit up with images of families navigating challenges, growing apart, and ultimately coming back together. As the credits rolled, I felt a lump in my throat. "You're telling our story," I said softly. Kevin nodded, his expression serious. "It's a story worth telling, Dad." Emma reached for my hand, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "You've been our anchor through everything. We wouldn't be here without you." Their words overwhelmed me, and for a moment, I couldn't speak. Finally, I found my voice. "I didn't do it alone," I said. "You two gave me the strength to keep going. Watching you grow into the people you are today, it's the greatest gift I could ever ask for. Life isn't always what we expect it to be, but it's what we make of it that defines us." Have you ever looked back on a difficult time and realized how much you've grown because of it? Let me know in the comments, and thank you for being part of this journey. Click that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out on exciting new stories every day. I'll see you in the next one.